We are picking up from last week. And last week, we kind of reviewed over chapter 6 and chapter 7. So this week, we are going to go to chapter 8 and 9. Okay? So it's very beautifully laid out. When I was really thinking about Puja Gurudev's Self-Unfoldment text, sometimes we wonder why everything is in the position that it's in. If you look at chapter 7, we explore the concepts of Satyam, Brahmacharya, and Ahimsa. Chapter 6 talks a lot about Satyam. It talks a lot about Satyam because it's about finding that ideal, finding that selfless, high ideal with which we can work towards and living up to it. Chapter 8, it actually is a lot about Brahmacharya. It's a lot about Brahmacharya because it's a lot about controlling our energies. And chapter 9 is a lot about Ahimsa. And we will see why. So those 3 values that we saw in chapter 7, they actually, each chapter takes up a form of that value. So in chapter 6, we saw that in order for us to reach what we call success in Vedanta, meaning success means how close have we gotten to the divine. 2 things are key. One is to find something inspiring to do and to have it be selfless. And of course, to let go of whatever the results are. Chapter 8, why is it Brahmacharya? Is because it talks about how now that we've gotten this energy, we've gotten this ideal, we know what our ideal is in life, and we're ready to work towards it. Sometimes our energy gets dissipated in various fields. And so chapter 8 talks to us about the various fields that dissipate our energy. We all have seen this before, so I will just make note of it so that all of you can see. 1 is regrets of the past. Next is anxiety for the future. And 3 is excitement in the present. What happens to us is we're ready to work, but we're bogged down by the past. Past either out of fear. Sometimes we have never done something before, so we're scared to take it on. Sometimes we're afraid to fail. Sometimes we're afraid of humiliation. What will people say? Sometimes we're just afraid that it's too big. It's much bigger than us. Sometimes there are so many regrets that keep on binding our minds. That, we've done this before and we're still carrying those regrets now. Whatever it is that we've done, we're still carrying it. And that zaps out our energy completely. Why we're not able to focus so much is because of these things. Imagine the sun, the beautiful sun, right? If you focus all of those rays into a glass, that glass can burn something. It can cause fire. So similarly, when we talk about Brahmacharya, when our energy is conserved, that energy can really do something spectacular if all of these are gotten rid of. So in the past, when we talked about this chapter, I had said there's only 2 reasons why we should go into the past. 2 reasons why we should even get to that territory. 1 is to get those lessons from the past. We don't necessarily need all of our past. We just need to know what those lessons are because they made us who we are today. Our present is very much because of our past. Another thing we need to get or draw from the past is our inspiration. Many times we have these wonderful, inspiring moments in the past where we excelled, where we were so dynamic. What happened there? And how can I bring that emotion to this present? That's the only time where it's worth looking at the past. Otherwise, it's just a heavy load that we're carrying. one of our young students, she wanted to talk to me, and she had gone through a lot in the past, and she didn't know how to let go of it. She said it's just so much and it's weighing on her. And so I had told her this exercise. I said, just keep those 5 lessons that you've gotten from your past, keep the lessons and drop it. It's done. It was a part of us which maybe we were not so proud of. Maybe we made such crazy mistakes. Maybe we failed, or maybe we did something terrible. That's okay. But that's not going to help us in the future. So, past is to be dropped. And past is also to be atoned for. Please note that it's not to be dropped and forgotten about. It's to be dropped, learned from, and atoned for. So, like those of you who are in the Mahabharata class, Yudhishthira makes a huge mistake in his gambling in this dice game. But the most beautiful thing about Yudhishthira is he makes a huge mistake. He puts all his brothers at stake and even his wife at stake. But the rest of the years in his forest, he performed severe austerity to pay for that. So he dropped that mistake, but he atoned for it. So the way that the past doesn't weigh on us is to atone for it and to learn from it. And the good moments, of course, to be inspired by it. Then we can deal with that past. Another thing that zaps our energy, we saw, is the future. And last week, I had brought this distinction between visualizing and worrying. When we envision and we plan ahead, that's very different from worrying about the future. Envisioning and planning ahead is to be done. And that we do usually at a set time. It's a very creative process. Worrying is a very draining process, and that comes in so many, many different times. And that worrying, it zaps our energy into things which we cannot control. And we talked about this also last time. There's so many, many things beyond our control. It's just not in our control. So there's no point in struggling to say what's going to happen. How is it going to be? Is it going to be like this? Is it not going to be like this? There's no point on doing that because we really don't know. So that's another huge, huge drainer of energy. We talked about that enough, so I won't go into that too much. The next thing that's a huge drainer of energy is excitement in the present. We get so excited and overwhelmed when there's so many things. We open our mailbox, we check our phone, so many people demand so many things of us. We get so excited that we don't know how to deal with it, how to tackle it. To deal with that in the present is prioritizing. Is to just pause and prioritize, and we just take one by one. That's all. Just step by step we take. And if we were able to take step by step, do it one by one, we will finish with all of the tasks completely. What happens is we keep thinking, oh, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. And the whole mind time we're thinking, I have to do this, I have to do it, but nothing gets done. So to deal with the present is to just prioritize, just stop and say, okay, this first, that first, next first. So in this way, all of these 3 leakages of energy are dealt with. And when all of these 3 leakages of energy are dealt with, then we are left with that power of the mind to do what we need to do in the moment. The most beautiful, most efficient act is when all of our mind and senses are in the present moment doing it. That's the most productive act ever. So if we can get rid of the mind, see, the mind travels when there is space. When we give it the space of the past, it goes there. When we give it the space of the future, it goes there. When we give it excitement, it goes there. The goal of a seeker is to cut that space. So it is just severely, sincerely in the present. and it can't look anywhere else. And when that mind is completely in the present, that is also brahmacharya, because that is the most beautiful act. Imagine if we are at present in every single thing that we do, then how can we create harm? We can't. So this chapter focuses on conserving the energy in these ways. Now, before I go into the next chapter, I'll pause here for a moment to see if everything's clear or anyone has, so that how do you bring that discipline with over analyzing, because, or overthinking, because sometimes in the present we can still do that, right? So let's say we have a task, a simple task to read something, right? Or to cook something, and you're over analyzing how many things go in there, how many things, and so many thoughts come into your mind about it, right? The idea is to slow down that mind. That over analyzing, overthinking is nothing but the speed of that mind. And today, let me tell you, our mind cannot be slow. It's very difficult. It's very hard for the mind to just focus. Usually someone is doing something, typing and then looking and then opening this and then opening that. I had one meeting with one of our youth, and I was just talking to him, and he's opening so many screens. I'm like, one one by one, but they're so used to opening this, opening that, to showing this, just talk one thing at a time. So when we overthink, we have to slow ourselves down. We have to just focus on your breath. The practical step is focus on your breath, focus on your breathing, and just take one thing. Just take one thing. That's it. And just tell yourself, I'm just going to do this, and that's it. I'm not going to do anything else. And you see how beautiful that act can be. The trouble with us is we feel we can be more efficient if we do more things at one time. But that doesn't work, because we half do everything. There is a beauty in just simply doing one thing at one time. There is such a beauty, a grace to it. It is so wonderful to watch also. Have you ever just watched somebody who's just so engaged in something? Like, that itself is a work of art. So what we have to do is we have to consciously slow our minds down. We have to consciously say, okay, just do this, and this much is enough. And what also helps is not in highly thinking tasks, in tasks where it's not much thinking is required, repetitive things that we do every day, like sweep the floor or like wash the dishes. In those repetitive things that we do every day, you can put some music, some wonderful background that will help you get into that mood. Otherwise, what happens is, even when we do those tasks, the mind travels so far. Better if it travels to Bhagavan, isn't it? So that can also help. So this it's a very difficult thing. How do you, if you have trouble shedding the past, what do you do? See, the biggest thing that I can say, as I said, is prayaschitta, atonement. That you have to, one is we have to sincerely accept that we made that mistake. It was a huge mistake, and we made that mistake, and come face to face with it. But we don't have to keep condemning ourselves for it. These are two different things. Okay, so please note, these are two different things. When we make a mistake, accepting is the right way to go. Condemning is not the right way to go. Accepting that we make the mistake and then taking up a prayaschitta, that is what we need to do. Condemning is just keeping ourselves down all the time, that this is how I am, I can't believe I did this, I'm worthless, I'm this, I'm that. In our shastra, that we're against condemning oneself and putting oneself down. Because very clearly in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, Api suduracharaha, even if there is one person who is sudurachara, who is very good at doing bad things, suduracharaha, I consider him a sadhu. Sadhu se mantavya. I consider him or her a sadhu. If there's an if, samyak vyavasito hisaha. If they make a firm resolve to change here and now and they see through it, Lord Krishna says, I consider them a sadhu. So accepting and atoning is what should be done versus condemning. And that atoning, as I said, is prayaschitta. There and then I have to say in my life, I have made this mistake and I have to make up for it. And it will take years to make up for it. Please think, the bigger the mistake, the longer it will take to make up for it. Yudhishthira atoned for 13 years. 13 years he atoned for that one mistake which happened in a matter of 10 minutes, must be. 10 minutes mistake he made in his life, 13 years he atoned. But that great is his sense of tapasya. So that is where one has to admire. Arjuna, as I told you, there was in Mahabharata, he was not supposed to go into the room where Yudhishthira was with Draupadi. He went. 12 years he atoned. 12 years. So for us, also, I'm not saying 12 years, so you'll say I might not be living by that. I'm just saying whatever it takes, we have to make that atonement. We have to change. That is the real atonement for shedding the past. Because if we have not changed, then we will continue to feel guilty. That is the way it is. And some people get into these things that I keep making the same mistake again. I keep making the same mistake. I keep doing it. And that's where chapter 9, ties in, where we really have to sit down and stop and start introspecting. So that must be shed. So if we accept and atone, we can shed the past. If we do not, it's very difficult. And the third also step is we must seek forgiveness, especially to the ones that we've hurt. We must seek forgiveness. Otherwise, it will be very, very hard to shed the past. And, we had a camp on Sri Rama Gita. And somebody asked me, how do you prepare for the death of a loved one? I told them, listen, the first most important thing to prepare for the death of a loved one is you keep a clean slate. Whoever your family is, your closest family, you keep that slate clean. That is the most important thing, because that will be very difficult to bear. If you lose somebody and there was some unfinished karma or unfinished thing, if we lose someone and there was some unfinished thing, or we did not ask for forgiveness, or we had a big regret, that will be the most painful thing that will be very hard to overcome. So the third thing is how to when you're having trouble shedding the past, is to seek forgiveness and keep that slate clean. That's how we should live our lives. It's not very easy, but it's also not very hard. It all boils down to this ego. And we have already said that we are not this ego. It all boils down to wanting that ego to be right, to be noticed, to be attended upon. But if one understands that that's not the goal of life, then all of these things become easier. So clear? Yeah? Okay. So I asked you to name 10 things you can't control, and you all named like 12, 13. So you see how futile is it to think about or worry about something which we have no control over. Just please think. Just please think about how futile is it to worry about something we have absolutely no control over. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything to help the situation. It just means we shouldn't do anything to worry about the situation. So, for example, outcome of elections was the last example given, right? That doesn't mean I shouldn't vote because I don't know. No, you can impact that. Do what you can, but please remember the results. It doesn't only depend on you, it depends on so many factors. So do what you can to impact and then let go. This much is where our energy should be conserved. Do what we can to impact and then let go, because it's absolutely illogical. Actually, if you think about it, 99% of the things we cannot control. We really can't control. The only thing that we can control is our effort and our action. That's it. That's absolutely it. Therefore, if one logically understands this, one is convinced by it, then that word worry will not exist. And all that energy that's zapped into being worried will get channeled into actually making an impact so that things actually turn out for the better. Now, that is a smart way to live. So this is chapter 8 in a nutshell. Okay? This much is clear? Yeah? It's very hard to practice. It's very hard to practice, right? Yeah. Okay. So now we are going to chapter 9. Now, I remember last week, Vivek had asked this question. So we will first go to this question, and then we will go to chapter 9. Chapter 9 talks about the mind, right? And before we get into this topic about the mind, it's always important for us to see where we are at as seekers. Because I'll tell you what the challenge is. See, the mind, as you know, we have the mind and we have the intellect. And we know that thoughts that are of the deliberating or emotional nature, that is called the mind. That flow of thoughts, which is of the emotional nature, of deliberating nature, is mind. Thoughts of a determined nature is called the intellect. Now, a lot of times what happens is there is the battle between the mind and the intellect. Gurudev opens up this chapter with saying that there are 4 personalities. There's a physical personality, there's a mental personality, intellectual personality, and then there's a spiritual personality. So here, for example, in me, there's a physical personality. There's something that wants to satiate, wants to make that physical part of me happy. At the same time, there's a part in me, which is my mental personality, which wants to make my mind very happy. Those thoughts of an emotional and deliberating nature, it wants to make my mind happy. At the same time, there's thoughts in me that want to make my intellect very happy. Thoughts of a very determined nature. And at the same time, there is a part of me which is of the spiritual nature. There's a part of me which is of the spiritual nature. And that spiritual nature, those thoughts of a spiritual nature, they want to make the spiritual aspect of me very happy. So now we go here and we think about all of these 4 personality layers. And I'll just give you an example so we know. For example, we are trying to, let us say, we are trying to maybe wake up earlier. Okay, let's say we're trying to wake up earlier. And we have this struggle. We're trying to wake up earlier, and the physical part of us, when it's time to wake up, wants to sleep. It just wants to sleep because it's like, like it's just the body is feeling the comfort of the bed. And the body just says, I want to just lie down and sleep. So there is that point. Then there's that um, emotional nature, that mental nature where says, yesterday I slept so late, so I might as well sleep in. I slept so late, I couldn't sleep at night. I slept so late, so I might as well sleep in this morning. That the mental part of me is trying to justify. Please note that this mind is always trying to justify. Then the intellectual part of me will say, no, but I must get up. I must wake up early. I said that I would, and I must do it. That intellectual part of me will say, this is what I must do. The spiritual nature in me will say, my goal is the realization of truth, and therefore I must do it. So each one has kind of their way of telling us what to do. And sometimes there's a battle with all of these 4 personality layers. But the most battle comes between the mind and the intellect. This is where most of the battle comes. Most of the time, it's the intellect wants to do something, but the mind just wants to go another way. And when we say intellect here, we're talking about that sattvic intellect, because intellect can be rajasic, intellect can be tamasic. So I'm talking about the sattvic intellect. So that intellect, most of the time, wants to do things the proper way as it has learned in the scriptures, but the mind wants to go another way. And this is where we are all at. We learn these beautiful values in our scriptures. We read wonderful things. We come to satsang, but that mind is unable to live up to that. It does not surrender to that intellect. It just wants to go away from that intellect. And therefore, the topic of the mind comes. The topic of the mind comes in the sense to how to get that mind to surrender to the intellect. Now, before we go to how to surrender that mind to the intellect, first we will go to how do you know if the mind is surrendered to the intellect? So this was Vivek's question. So Vivek, right? So how do you know if you're improving? How do you know if the mind is surrendered to the intellect? Then we will go to how to surrender the mind to the intellect. So the first, I will give you 5 points. How do you know? How do we know if we're evolving as seekers? How do we know? The first point is there will be regularity in our practice, in our daily living. If we have a regular discipline that we are following, then that is a sign of evolution. Because regularity means there is depth. So when we have routines, when we have a ritual, then that thing becomes deep, especially when we have a spiritual practice and we are regular at it, then that becomes deeper and deeper. If we're coming to this satsang and we're regular, it becomes deeper. If we are reading a certain book every day, that becomes deeper. So the first thing is there a regularity in my practice? And if there is, then that is a sign that I am evolving. The second sign that I am evolving is my reactions have turned into responses. So now, how are we? Guruji puts it very, very beautiful. When we are in the path and we are struggling, we will always be like, what happened? Like very sharp reactions we will have. Somebody will say something and we'll be, I can't believe you did that. I can't believe that happened. Very sharp. But slowly they will turn into responses. So that what will become, okay, so what? Now let's see what will happen. It will become more calm. Response means that I'm thinking before I act. React means I'm not thinking, I'm just acting. That action came and I'm reacting to it. Response means there's a pause and I'm thinking about it, and then I'm able to give a response from that calm mind. I'm operating from sattva. Remember, all of these things presuppose that that seeker has become more sattvic. So there is the response there instead of reaction. The third point is my rebound time is quicker. So this, we had this question from Sanjay last time, no? That sometimes you fall and what happens? If I am growing as a seeker, my rebound time is quicker. Rebound meaning I bounce back faster. I'm able to pick up myself faster. So if I'm falling, if I made a mistake, I'm able to catch myself and say, hey, this is wrong. Let's get back, get back, get back. You know, when you're driving now, many of you must be driving now, and you're going on one of those long exit roads that are terrible. They're like miles apart, and you miss one exit, you have to go miles before you turn around, you know, and so much time and energy is wasted. But if we, you know, are very conscious, right away we will see, before we're about to miss the exit, we'll say, oh my gosh, we're about to miss the exit. We catch ourselves and we go. So that rebound time is quicker. This must have happened to you. This happens to me also. That is quicker because there's more alertness in the life of the seeker. The fourth one is, what happens is remembrance. I am able to remember the teachings. I'm able to remember, oh, I read this in Self-Unfoldment. Oh, I saw this in this article. Oh, my parents have said this to me. Oh, my kid told me this about Lord Krishna, and I must remember. So we remember the teachings, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be from this class. It can be something that your spouse had told you. It can be something that your parents, your children have told you. But that remembering the teachings, it will hit you. It will strike. And that will feature that I'm evolving, because the mind has that much purity that that teaching is coming. I mean, please think, for a spiritual teaching to come into the mind, how pure must that mind be? It must have some sense, some semblance of purity. And the fifth one is we become more reflective. We become more introspective. So whenever something happens, we don't look, oh, it's that person's fault, it's that person's fault. The first place we look is, what can I do better? We become more reflective. We become more introspective. When our personality changes this way, it means we are evolving as seekers. It means that that mind has become divinized to surrender to the intellect. That's what that means. So now, that is how to know if the mind is surrendered to that intellect. And by the way, this is if you've seen Lord Ganesha, sometimes he has one foot sitting, one foot down. What that means is his mind is surrendered to the intellect. That's a symbolism of that. So if you look at Lord Ganesha and if you have that, that's what that means. Now, what does it look like if the mind is not surrendered to the intellect? If the mind is not surrendered to the intellect, then all of the opposite things will be true. There will be irregularity in my practice. Irregular. Sometimes I'm able to practice, sometimes I'll not be able to practice. I will not have most responses. I'll have reactions. I will have sharp reactions like, what's going on? Why is it happening? And I will fluctuate up and down. My mind will be all over the place. And then my bouncing back time is very, very long. I catch myself after a long time. And I'm not reflective. Not reflective at all. If anything happens, the first person I ask is, question that I ask is, why did you do this to me? It's your fault that it happened. How can you be so insensitive? Keep going outside. And I'm not able to remember the teachings. What did I study? I forgot. I don't know. I don't know what I read. That kind of mind has not surrendered to that intellect. What can you do with that mind? Not much. You can just live life. That's all. We can't evolve. Forget about evolution. That mind can't do anything. So where we have to work is the mind. Vedanta is a very, very subtle art. That art involves a sharp intellect. So the whole philosophy needs a sharp intellect to know that I am the self. I am not the body, mind, intellect, that I am existence, consciousness, bliss. We need this very sharp and subtle intellect. But to live up to that, we need a pure mind. And so that philosophy goes straight to the intellect, but religion goes straight to the mind. All of these practices that we do, puja, japa, contemplation, all of that hit right to the mind. They strike at the mind because that mind needs it. And that's why this whole religion, that is the purpose of the whole religion, is to strike at the mind. Because intellectually we get it, and philosophy is so deep, incredibly deep. But to strike at the mind, we need these practices. And one such practice we see in chapter 9 is introspection. And this we have seen, and I will touch upon it so that we know. What introspection really means is being able to examine the mind. It means being able to examine the mind and to see where it's at. Why is this necessary? Because that's what has to be cleaned up, is the mind. That's really where we have to work. And so many things can happen when we're trying to examine this mind. One thing which can happen is we're absolute denial. We're in absolute denial. We deny that there's something wrong with us. When other people come and tell us, oh, you have an anger issue. I think you're drinking too much. Or, you know what, you procrastinate a lot. We cannot accept it. We cannot accept it. But when we introspect, we can. And that's why introspective analysis is so, so important. Because the first thing we tend to do is we tend to deny. When people tell us there's something negative about us, we just deny. Or sometimes we see that it's there in us, but we still deny. And when we deny it, there's no possibility of fixing it. We've seen Ravana has denied that he's doing something wrong by taking Mother Sita. He denies it. He thinks he has the right to do it. But nobody can correct him because he's absolutely denied it. So this introspective analysis gets to that root of, am I denying that there's an issue with me? It lets me be honest with my own self. Because clearly sometimes there is an issue, but we're not saints. Second thing is, sometimes we try to justify. We say, yes, there's an issue, but if people were in my place, they would also do it. Or, if it's okay if I skip one day, it's okay if I do it like this. We justify. And so what happened is, whatever our wrongdoings are, we decorate it. We decorate it and we adorn it and say, yeah, I did this wrong, but it's okay anyway. It's okay. No, it's not okay. It's not okay. This freedom we take to justify our negative behavior is not okay. Another thing we do is we condemn ourselves. And this I talked about earlier also, is we really put ourselves down because we feel like we're terrible. But that changes when we atone, when we change. So introspection happens, these things can happen rather in introspection. And introspection is really done to see the condition of our mind and to see how we can evolve further. Because if we do not introspect, we will not evolve. That's just a fact. We can learn as much Vedanta as we want, but if we are not seeing where the problem lies herein, we will not be able to fix it. So the first step of introspection is introspect daily. And we've gone through these exercises wherein late at night, not so late, but before you're feeling sleepy, after dinner, you just take a few minutes and you go through your day. Just go through your days, rewind it, play it like a movie, and just observe that day. Just observe what has happened that day. How was your behavior throughout that day? And Gurudev writes very beautifully, at first we will look like saints. At first we will look like there's nothing wrong with us. Everything's correct. But as we keep doing it, the next step is then detect. There's something there that needs to be fixed. There's clearly something there that we should do better. And here's where we brought that rosebud thorn analogy. One good thing that we did would be our rose. One thing we need to improve on would be our bud. And one thing that we should totally not do again would be our thorn. And so we analyze ourselves this way. And so we become aware of that negative quality in us. And let me tell you, when we become aware, which is the process of detection, we will get rid of it. It's very hard to have a stain right smack on your clothes and not want to get rid of it. You will want to wash it off right away. It's hard to have when you have like a big wrinkle or a big mark in your face, not to want to put so much cream on it. You want to do. Or those who are afraid of white hair, if you see one white hair, how much hair dye you'll put just to make your hair black and so that nobody sees it, isn't it? When we see all of these things in us, it's very hard not to fix. So the same way in the detection process, when we see a negative quality, it's very hard not to fix. We feel so ashamed. So the third step is to negate ruthlessly. Get rid of it. Just tell yourself, we're going to get rid of it. And just even by that observing that we have that quality, that itself gives you the strength to get rid of it. Please don't think, how am I going to get rid of it? It's going to be so hard. Just knowing that I have it and being aware that I have it helps me really get rid of it. It happens. It will happen. And the last step is substitute wisely. So after you negate that bad habit or bad quality, substitute it with something positive. And this actually happens naturally, because once you negate it, a beautiful value or virtue will come. That is called introspection. So the first one is to introspect daily, just do a daily review of how I am. The next step is to detect diligently what is there that is not correct, that has to be fixed. Then to negate ruthlessly, just take it out and substitute wisely. And as I said, this will come automatic. It will be automatic process. The most important thing is that we become aware of our faults. Once we become aware of our faults, you will see we will start fixing them. It will happen. But we should take time to become aware of it. That's the thing. So this much is called introspection. And through this, we will find what is our big issue. And in most of our lives, there are only 2 or 3 big issues. Everything else is a small issue. Whatever is a small issue, just leave it. Don't make it a big issue. That is the problem with us. Small issue is, I drink coffee 1.5 cup. I should drink 1 cup. Okay, that is an issue. But the bigger issue is anger. Some people are focusing on that 1.5 cup coffee instead of anger. So if it's a small issue, let it be a smaller issue. It can still be fixed, but please put the energy towards bigger issues. That's what has to be fixed. So, and as I said, in our lives, there will only be 2 or 3 big issues. There will only be 2 or 3 habits that we really need to fix. And once we fix those, again, we'll be aware of more habits that we'll have to fix, but it gets easier and easier and easier as time goes. So this much is introspection. I'll stop here. So how do you negate a negative thought? Is through the process of sublimation. So it's not distracting your mind. It's giving your mind something much higher to think about. I'll give you an example. For example, one is bothered about somebody said something, somebody sent one email, and that's been on your mind. Then you can turn your mind towards reading a book, reading a great book that will give you the ability to deal with your mind better. Or you can sing a song, or you can go for a walk. It's not so much distracting your mind, it's elevating your mind to think better. Huh? Distracting per se will say just give your mind something else to do. That's not what I mean. What I mean is give your mind something more elevating to do. That is called sublimation. When we sublimate, then those negative thoughts automatically fall. Hmm? You will see this whole festival that we've done, no? Navaratri, all of it is just divinizing the mind. That is all we're doing. So everyone that's doing this, I guarantee you, their mind has become divinized. Because it is such a powerful thing. That's what it does. So that's the way to negate negative thoughts. Is that clear?